Yet another week of us doing our Bible study, no, study of the Bible study thing. Welcome.
The clown hour.
You speak for yourself. I'm obviously a very serious person.
You are.
And it will remain that way throughout this hour. Well, maybe an hour if you're lucky. We are online. I can see that two of two things are connected. That means we're connected to Facebook and YouTube. But nobody's watching yet.
Oh, there's one watching.
One person. Hello, that one person. Welcome. And
oh, there's two watching.
You really are.
Yeah, I mean, this is
the numbers.
Yeah, this intrigues me.
Well, say good morning to us, and we will repay the kindness. Hope everyone's okay, and we're having a nice cool down of the weather until tomorrow. Good morning, Karen. It's good to see you. And tomorrow afternoon, which will be Thursday afternoon, there's supposed to be lots of thunder and stormy things coming, which I find kind of weird because it's so nice. But out in the Gulf, there's
trouble brewing.
Exactly. Anyway, it's good to have you with us. 3 people now.
I know.
Be still your beating heart and all that.
That's it.
So last week we looked at the characters of both Abram and God. We looked at how Abram's polytheistic background would have affected how he saw the God who was interacting with him, right down to the language Abram used about God. And we also saw how the God who appeared to Abram didn't really disclose much about who he was, and indeed used language and names that would have been really familiar to Abram. Good morning, Kit. Yes, got my starry
Good
night
morning.
with additional Abbey Road Dobermans thing going on at the bottom. People don't really see that because the camera doesn't allow it. And I'm going to strut around just to show Dobermans off.
Yes.
Doing the John Paul Ringo and the other guy, George, thing. Anyway, as we work through this week, we will find that the character of God becomes more fully disclosed. Probably not the term I wanted to use, but there you go. Particularly through one particular word, laughter. And we will see Abram's character change in a big way. So we're going to get going. But before we do, we have to tell you that the study we are undertaking here is quite a superficial one. It may not seem it, but it actually is. The upcoming chapters have been studied by experts for generations. And they've produced a depth of information that's way beyond the scope of what we are doing. So please keep in mind that there's more to the story than we are saying. What we are doing is giving you the information that is agreed upon by most scholars who have studied it, whether they are Jewish or Christian. And good morning, Thomas, and good morning, Vern.
So, now we've got that out of the way, let's get on to the Bible.
Dun, dun, dun.
Chapters 17 and 18 of Genesis.
We're moving through it.
Yeah, we're moving fast. So, Abram and Sarai are still childless, and they are still awaiting God to do his thing. The beginning of chapter 17, we're told that Abram is now 99 years old. This means that 24 years have passed since the promise was first given to him. At this point, anyone would say that God may have promised, but that ship has long sailed, has been scuttled, and has sunk to the bottom of the ocean. Yet, God once more reiterates his original promise. Actually, God seems to become even more insistent on his promise. And it seems to get like a little like Father Andrew's sermons when he gets carried away.
Me? Get carried away?
Yeah.
Really?
You.
I don't know what you mean. Good morning, Anne.
When Abram was 99 years old, the Lord appeared to Abram and said to him, I am God Almighty. Now, the footnote says that the Hebrew that's the El Shaddai.
No, just L.
El, okay.
Just L.
Walk before me and be blameless, and I will make my covenant between me and you, and will make you exceedingly numerous. Then Abram fell on his face, and God said to him, As for me, this is my covenant with you. You shall be the ancestor of a multitude of nations. No longer shall your name be Abram, but your name shall be Abraham. And Abram was maybe translated exalted ancestor. And Abraham is taken here to mean ancestor of a multitude. For I have made you the ancestor of a multitude of nations. I will make you exceedingly fruitful, and I will make nations of you, and kings shall come from you. I will establish my covenant between me and you, and your offspring after you, throughout their generations, for an everlasting covenant to be God to you and to your offspring after you. Now, the word offspring in Hebrew means seed. And I will give you and to your offspring after you the land where you are now an alien, all the land of Canaan, for perpetual holding. I will be their God. As an aside, note that God describes himself as El one more time. Here, God tells Abram, now named Abraham, because of what God is going to do, that he will be the ancestor of kings, and describes a glorious future in which all of Abram's descendants will play a part in what God says is his covenant with Abram, reiterating that Canaan will be the place where it all begins. We've mentioned the word covenant before, but now it's time to try to define it. The word covenant in Hebrew is berith, and it means a binding commitment. Here, it commits God to maintaining a relationship with Abraham's descendants. I think it's interesting that the covenant binds God to an everlasting relationship. It creates a bond between God and these people. The idiomatic phrase "to make a covenant" means literally to cut a covenant. In the Septuagint version of the Hebrew scripture, the word used for berith, covenant, is didatheke. Diatheke.
Yeah.
Diatheke, which is a common technical word used in Greco-Roman law to describe a settlement of inheritance. It is used in the New Testament to describe the self-commitment, promises, and conditions by which God entered into relationship with humans. Diatheke is a will that distributes one's property after death according to the owner's wishes. And it's interesting to note that this covenant is completely unilateral or one-sided. The Hebrew word has several meanings. It can mean to eat with, which suggests fellowship and agreement. It can mean to bind or fetter, which suggests commitment. It can mean to allot, which suggests sharing. When God makes a covenant, he enters into an agreement to commit himself to give what he promises. It is purely an act of grace. In essence, a covenant is an arrangement, an agreement, but an agreement of a solemn and binding force. This early Semitic idea of covenant was, doubtless, that which prevailed among the Arabs.
And hi to Anne. And Thomas says, barren period. And he said, God was joking. Well, I'm thinking if you were Abram or Abraham and Sarah, you would think, yeah, this is a kind of cruel joke.
Yeah.
Really would be. But now we come to the ouch moment. That's what I'd like to call it anyway. As a sign of this relationship, God asks for something. So we're back to the text. God said to Abraham, as for you, you shall keep my covenant, you and your offspring after you throughout their generations. This is my covenant which you shall keep between me and you and your offspring after you. Every male among you shall be circumcised. You shall circumcise the flesh of your foreskins, and it shall be a sign of the covenant between you. Throughout your generations, every male among you shall be circumcised when he is 8 days old, including the slave born in your house and the one bought with your money from any foreigner who is not of your offspring. Both the slave born in your house and the one bought with your money must be circumcised. So shall my covenant be in your flesh, an everlasting covenant. Any uncircumcised male who is not circumcised in the flesh of his foreskin shall be cut off from his people. He has broken my covenant. Now, this is quite an inclusive list. Sons and slaves must be circumcised if they want to belong to this people. This is something that marks the future people of Israel quite literally. Now, when we were looking at this, the thing that I kind of zoned in on was the word slaves, and I started going off about, how God seems to be okay with slaves at this point. But Father Lewis just reminded me, rabbit hole, and he didn't want to go down there because we would have been sort of discussing this for ages and ages, and it's not something you can take lightly. Bill asks, so to attempt to understand the Bible, we need a glossary of names and phrases in Hebrew if we don't have you guys at hand. Well, no, they are in the Bible. It's just that most people don't pay any attention to them. And it's not something you should do. The translators of the Bible try to be as helpful as possible to use the English word that nearest makes sense to us nowadays. But language is a moving target, and they also want you to realize that there are alternatives to that. And when you are doing a translation, you have to make a choice of what you think the original writers were saying. So when you make a choice, you actually are committing yourself to a particular view of that particular scripture, which is a good thing and a bad thing.
Yeah. The bad thing is that whenever you do a translation, you always are translating in a context that you believe, that you understand. And there are various translations over the past 20, 30 years, or longer than that, 50 years, where some of the translations really reflect a theological outlook that the Episcopal Church would be very uncomfortable with.
Or a linguistic one. For example, the Good News Bible. It's terrible as a translation, but it played its part within the kind of Godspell, Jesus Christ Superstar era, in that it was a fresh version. It talks about the guards being police and stuff like that, and it's dated badly. It aged badly. Is that better? Aged badly. So it's not a Bible I would recommend, even though I believe it's still on sale. And I don't think it's
the Good News? Yeah, it is.
And I don't think it's been changed. So Thomas says, my twisted theological mind thinks, what a strange sign that is not readily visible. Then again, the new sign of water baptism is not visible either. Water disappears. The sign is hidden from view. Well, yeah, that's the kind of nature of sacraments, though, isn't it? Is an outward and visible. Here, with God saying to Abram and Sarai, and then Abraham and Sarah, it's an ongoing thing that they still have to travel with, and like one of the good things, like we mentioned last week, is that they're very human. There is this doubt. Or they try and force God's hand. I mean, that's where Ishmael comes from, because they think, well, God's not going to do it. We might as well do something about it, which again is very human. And I love that because I'm also human, believe it or not. And although he sometimes wants me to think that I'm an alien, it's the lizard eyes thing. Isn't it? Yeah, and the forked tongue now again.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not a lizard person at all. Anyway, back to the text where we were. So what we've just read is a quite inclusive list, and it does mark the people of Israel, well, the males, quite literally. Now, I used to think of circumcision as being absolutely unique to the Jewish people. But as I began to read about ancient history, I discovered that it was actually quite common. And Father Lewis will know more about this than me with your knowledge of ancient history, the Egyptians and stuff like that. But it turns out that circumcision for a desert dwelling people, it just makes a lot of sense. It's one of those required things that just makes life safer for a desert dwelling people. Um, Now, when we move back to the text, we see a reintroduction of a type of parallelism in that Abram and Sarai play an almost equal part in what's going on. So after God talks about Abram, now Abraham, God now talks to Sarai. So let's look at that. Slide 4. Boom. God said to Abraham, "As for Sarah, your wife, you shall not call her Sarai, but Sarah shall be her name. I will bless her, and moreover, I will give you a son by her. I will bless her, and she shall give rise to nations. Kings of peoples shall come from her." Then Abraham fell on his face and laughed, and said to himself, "Can a child be born to a man who is 100 years old? Can Sarah, who is 90 years old, bear a child?" And Abraham said to God, "Oh, that Ishmael might live in your sight." God said, "No, but your wife Sarah shall bear you a son, and you shall name him Isaac. I will establish my covenant with him as an everlasting covenant for his offspring after him. As for Ishmael, I have heard you. I will bless him and make him fruitful and exceedingly numerous. He shall be the father of 12 princes, and I will make him a great nation. But my covenant I will establish with Isaac, whom Sarah shall bear to you at this season next year." And when he had finished talking with him, God went up from Abraham. And the footnote here is that he laughs.
The meaning of the word Isaac.
Isaac, he laughs. And I love this bit, what's it, roll about the floor laughing? We got Rolf in when we do texts and stuff. Here is Isaac doing exactly that, rolling about the floor laughing. Weird.
It's not hard to imagine Abram, now Abraham, his reaction to this news. A change of name, sure. A change of my wife's name, sure. But once again, to talk about us having a child. If it had been possible once, we are now even more incapable of having children than we were before. And so Abraham laughs. Abraham tells God he's quite content now that Ishmael has been born and that Ishmael should be the keeper of God's promises. No need to do anything other than to keep the promise of multitudes, but through him. But God tells Abraham that he will finally take action. Yes, Ishmael will become the source of many people, but God will do as he first promised, and that this time next year Abraham will have physical proof in the form of a son. And oh, because you laughed at me when I told you this, you're going to name this boy Isaac as a constant reminder of it. These name changes and the name to be given to the yet to be born son reminds us of the importance of names. Names weren't just descriptions of people. Names gave you the essence of who that person is. And this applied just as much to the names of God.
If we continue, Thomas says again that out of visible sign, and in Paul's writing, Paul in Romans talks about this as being the circumcision of the heart. And Paul actually quotes Abraham here. So it's kind of a useful thing. But that's within a Christian context where we are kind of interpreting some of the things, and at the moment we're just sticking with the text as we find it and trying not to interpolate.
But I think you have to remember that Paul, even though he's following the Christ, is not a Christian in the sense of having a history of of
Ooh, you're talking about
year-
Pauline Christianity.
years and years and years of tradition.
Yeah.
He's interpreting scripture in a rabbinical way, and it's, rabbinical interpretation is quite complex, and you read it, and sometimes you are left scratching your head, wondering, what in the world is he talking
But
about?
it does go on for those extended sentences, doesn't it?
It's just like Father Andrew.
No. Let's see what it is. Aha. Thomas actually has a picture or hieroglyphic he bought in Egypt of circumcision. Other religions practice it also. The Egyptians did.
Yeah, the Egyptians did.
The Mesopotamians
Yeah.
did. It was, I'm not going to say it was common, but it happened to other cultures other than, like I said, I thought when I was a kid and reading this, I thought it was just, they introduced it and it was like a unique thing between the God of Israel and the people of Israel, but then turned out not to be.
With the Egyptians, it wasn't a practice that was used on all males. It had kind of a religious significance because all priests, scribes, the royal court, men in the royal court had to be circumcised.
Well, I'm out of here.
So they were participating in, they were kind of the only people participating in religious ritual. Common people didn't participate in the temple.
So how do I know you're a priest? Let me show you. Oh dear.
I think we need to move on.
Now, Sarah wasn't laughing, but she will be in a bit. And yes, Sarai, now Sarah, different names mean different things. Yes, the Old Testament is full of this. And even the New Testament is.
Yeah.
Jesus did it.
Yeah.
You were called, what was he called? What, Peter? I forgot his name.
Simon.
But now I call you Peter.
Yeah.
Because on this rock, and it's a big plain words there. Once we get there, you'll kind of understand.
I think one of the drawbacks of reading in translation is that you miss some of the humor and wordplay and references that are being made in the original language.
And to be honest, we really don't look for that kind of thing anyway. Do we? We don't think, there's going to be a joke coming up. We've been set up, but actually, yeah, it does happen. Anyway, back to where you were.
Yes.
So where
were we?
Oh, yes.
Aha.
Oh, so it kind of answers your question, Bill.
The name changes, and the name to be given to the yet to be born son reminds us of the importance of names. Names weren't just descriptions. Names gave you the essence of who that person is. And this applied just as much to the names of God. Now we begin chapter 18, and it forms a larger parallel to chapter 17 in that Sarah now becomes the focus. Here, Abraham is sitting at the door of his tent when three strangers approach.
Which needs sound effects.
Yeah. The Lord appeared to Abram by the oaks of Mamre, as he sat at the entrance of his tent in the heat of the day. He looked up and saw three men standing near him. When he saw them, he ran from the tent entrance to meet them and bowed down to the ground. He said, "My Lord, if I find favor with you, do not pass your servant. Let a little water be brought, and wash your feet, and rest yourselves under the tree. Let me bring a little bread, that you may refresh yourself, and after that you may pass on, since you have come to your servant." So they said, "Do as you have said." And Abraham hastened into the tent to Sarah and said, "Make ready quickly 3 measures of choice flour, knead it, and make cakes." Abraham ran to the herd and took a calf, tender and good, and gave it to the servant who hastened to prepare it. Then he took curds and milk and the calf that he had prepared and set it before them, and he stood by them under the tree while they ate. They said to him, "Where is your wife Sarah?" And he said, "There, in the tent." Then one said, I will surely return to you in due season, and your wife Sarah shall have a son. And Sarah was listening at the tent entrance behind him. Now Abraham and Sarah were old, advanced in age. It had ceased to be with Sarah after the manner of women. So Sarah laughed to herself, saying, After I have grown old, and my husband is old, shall I have pleasure? The Lord said to Abraham, Why did Sarah laugh and say, Shall I indeed bear a son now that I am old? Is anything too wonderful for the Lord? At the set time I will return to you in due season, and Sarah shall have a son. But Sarah denied, saying, I did not laugh, for she was afraid. And he said, Oh, yes, you did laugh. Now there were three footnotes, and the first one, Hebrew hymn. I guess it's on the other page.
It's just a different, rather than saying the Lord appeared to him, and somebody's put in
Abraham.
not somebody. The people who are producing this particular version, the New Revised Standard Version, just wanted to make sure you knew who that him was, so they put Abraham. And this again happens just to clarify any confusion otherwise.
And then there's a reference to oaks and being terebinths.
Mm-hmm.
And terebinths were a common tree in the region, and both oaks and terebinths represent strength and durability. One form of terebinth produces pistachios. It belongs to the cashew family. And the last footnote was C, and to measures, it's just the Hebrew word for measure.
So we don't really know what the measure is. At least I'm not sure we know.
No.
But yeah, it's get on with it and measure stuff.
So now back to Abraham. Abraham, displaying the importance of hospitality within his culture here, hurries out to meet the strangers, the visitors. Water is brought out so they can wash themselves. Then Abraham rushes to the tent and has Sarah start making some bread. Meanwhile, Abraham goes and slaughters a calf, a good one, we need to note, and prepares the meat. Within the Middle East and Mediterranean regions, hospitality was incredibly important. In a region that combined many harsh environments, to allow a traveler to pass through without any form of hospitality was basically a death sentence. They could die from lack of water, lack of food. It is because of this that an almost obligatory understanding of hospitality came about. Within this region and within the time frame of Abraham, the notion of hospitality grew up to become a moral obligation towards strangers passing through your territory.
Now note, as soon as Abraham saw the strangers, which he did from afar, he knew what he had to do, and so began to set up not just tea and biscuits, very English. Hello there, strangers. How are you? Would you like some tea? Would you like some cookies? But he produced a lavish meal, one that would have cost him both in time and livestock. Within the world of the ancient Middle East, it was often understood that to welcome a stranger was to welcome God. We should not underestimate the importance of hospitality, because later Hebrew and then Christian understanding of hospitality states that not to be hospitable is a sure way to incur divine wrath. Wrath. Yeah. I almost said it, but I didn't. So, once again, we go back to the text. When the meal is ready, the three strangers eat. As they do so, Sarah remains out of the way. Well, she may be well out of the way, but she remains within earshot, for she listens to the conversation. In their conversation, the strangers repeat what both Abraham and Sarah already heard, that Sarah will bear a son. This time it's Sarah who laughs out loud. And here we get some added information that Sarah's menstrual cycles have ended. And so Sarah tells herself that the pair of them are now so old she can't imagine anything going on, never mind the begetting of a child. But the visitors overhear Sarah's laughing, even if it's internal, and tell her that her time will come when she will bear a son. And then the text shifts in tone and subject. Oops, wrong one. There we go. Then the men set out from there and looked towards Sodom, and Abraham went with them to set them on their way. The Lord said, "Shall I hide from Abraham what I am about to do, seeing that Abraham shall become a great and mighty nation, and all the nations of the earth shall be blessed in him? No, for I have chosen him, that he may charge his children and his household after him to keep the way of the Lord by doing righteousness and justice, so that the Lord may bring about for Abraham what he has promised him." Then the Lord said, "How great is the outcry against Sodom and Gomorrah, and how very grave their sin. I must go down and see whether they have done altogether according to the outcry that has come to me, and if not, I will know."
Now, the three guests leave Abraham's table and then set off for a known destination. Yet they have Abraham walk with them to guide them partially along their way. We have then the Lord, all caps, which we now have learned it means to translate the word Yahweh, which implies that this text was added by the Yahwist editors after or during the Babylonian captivity, is what we think maybe they were putting it together. From these few chapters, we gain a lot of knowledge both about Abraham and about the God he is now serving. Yahweh says, "Shall I hide from Abraham what I am about to do, seeing that Abraham shall become a great and mighty nation, and all the nations of the earth shall be blessed in him?" But who is God talking to? I think that this is the three strangers talking among themselves in the setting of the story. And
Did I ask you today, did I say, do you think this is a kind of Trinitarian thing?
Oh, I think that would be reading
Too much into it.
that would be reading Christian theology backwards. The church has seen this as a Trinitarian manifestation or epiphany, but I think that's our interpretation looking backwards. The interpretation of the time, I think, would have been that these three visitors are talking among themselves. Now, Father Andrew thinks that this talking among themselves is a theatrical device in which we hear the thoughts of God, not really saying anything, but thinking, what am I going to do?
Talk to Abraham or shall I
Yeah.
not? Yeah.
Whoever or however this is, the text continues. "No, I have chosen him, that he may charge his children and his household after him to keep the way of the Lord by doing righteousness and justice, so that the Lord may bring about for Abraham what he has promised to him." Note the capitalization Lord once again, which means that it's a translation of the name Yahweh.
All through this, it's this
all the way
particular
through.
Story.
God wants Abraham to be fully appraised of God's plan, and does this because Abraham has proven his faithfulness and has acted justly. Where and how did Abraham do this? Well, Abraham did follow through when God told him to circumcise himself and all the boys and men in his company. And Abraham did display the highest level of hospitality to the three strangers. And so God does tell Abraham what he wants to do, and Abraham is unimpressed. So the men turned from there and went toward Sodom, while Abraham remained standing before the Lord. Then Abraham came near and said, "Will you indeed sweep away the righteous with the wicked? Suppose there are 50 righteous within the city. Will you then sweep away the place and not forgive it for the 50 righteous who are in it? Far be it from you to do such a thing, to slay the righteous with the wicked, so that the righteous fare just as the wicked. Far be that from you. Shall not the judge of the earth do what is just?" And the Lord said, "If I find at Sodom 50 righteous in the city, I will forgive the whole place for their sake." Abraham answered, "Let me take it upon myself to speak to the Lord, I who am but dust and ashes. Suppose 5 of the 50 righteous are lacking. Will you destroy the whole city for lack of 5? And he said, "I will not destroy it if I find 45 there." Again he spoke to him, "Suppose 40 are found there." He answered, "For the sake of 40 I will not do it." Then he said, "Oh, do not let the Lord be angry if I speak. Suppose 30 are found there." He answers, "I will not do it if I find 30. Well, I lost my place. He said, "Let me take it upon myself to speak to the Lord. Suppose 20 are found there." And he answered, "For the sake of 20 I will not destroy it." Then he said, "Oh, do not let the Lord be angry if I speak just once more. Suppose 10 are found there." He answered, "For the sake of 10 I will not destroy it." And the Lord went his way when he had finished speaking to Abraham, and Abraham returned to his place.
This is an incredible and, I think, a beautiful story. It's one in which a mortal man questions the God of all creation and seemingly changes that God's mind. We have to love the sheer audacity of Abraham when he starts to bargain down the number of good people who would be affected by God's actions. If you've ever been involved in the Arab world, you will immediately recognize the bartering that's going on, something that's still central to Middle Eastern commerce. And as Abraham moves to an ever lower number, he becomes increasingly apologetic, as if by naming a lower number, he is doing God a disservice. In reality, though, God is just proving that in choosing Abraham, he's chosen correctly. Here, it seems as if God's making sure Abraham is made of the right stuff, is willing to object when his own moral compass seems at odds with the moral compass God seems to want to use. Now, again, you've got to remember this because it will become important later. Now, the next couple of chapters do not include Abraham or Sarah, but these chapters do parallel activities and adventures they've already undergone, displaying both the how to, Abraham, and how not to, Sodom. And we will look at those stories and the parallelism involved next week. And we're pretty much through for this session because we've unpacked a lot. Now, I do realise that I didn't put the remaining footnotes in that portion of Scripture because we do have F under the word Lord, which will explain what
That it's Yahweh.
Is. No, it's not capitalized.
Oh.
So it could be Elohim or something.
Yeah, Elohim.
So, grab your New Revised Standard Versions, find this chapter, which I've forgotten what it is.
18?
18, 9, oh, is it just 18? No. Whatever the chapter is. You know, because you've followed it. And then you will find it. Hello, Father Bill. Doom-ba-doo. Fathers, care to comment on the treif meal that Abraham served? Remember that rabbinic tradition held that knew and kept
Abraham.
the law. Oh, Abraham knew and kept the law instinctively. Oh, Well, no, because we'll be dealing with that later on when we move forward in towards how the law came about, and Abraham is sort of seen to be
The exemplar.
the exemplar of it. And you're right; it seems that he did it instinctively, but I wouldn't say that the meal itself is representative of something that was seen as a big deal, a good meal. I'm trying to think of fish and chips. I think England's known for fish and chips, and so like the meal du jour, if you want to call it that, that you would want to represent a good meal. If you met a stranger in England, they say, well, let's go to the fish and chip shop and get fish and chips, or let me do it for you. It's kind of a paltry thing, really. But within this, I mean, just think, you've got to kill some of your livestock. That takes time. You've got to drain all the blood. That takes time. Your wife's busy making stuff. She's baking away.
Baking bread.
Yeah.
And that doesn't happen in a half an hour.
So there's all that going on. And it's the intent to be a good host, which is the important takeaway here.
Oh, meat and milk.
Free bentos. They're just terrible. Sorry, go on.
Father Bill said meat and milk. That would be contrary to kosher laws, because you were not supposed to have at the same meal milk, cheese, dairy products, and meat. But in chronological time, this predates the Levitical law. But it is interesting that that the story remains with both meat and milk at the table at the same time.
Yeah.
I think that this is more than just like a representative meal. It says that Abraham goes out and kills a calf that is good. When you kill a calf, you are limiting your future prospects. I think he was intending to give them a really lavish meal. I remember reading that a description of a meal.
The fish and chips.
Fish and chips are good.
Or as Bill said, the Abraham and Sarah sent out for pizza.
Yeah, no.
Jehovah's Pizza.
Now I've lost my train of thought.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
You were talking about the lavishness and the cost of.
I was reading a description of one of these hospitable meals, and it said that there weren't just one type of olive. There were three types, and that there was not just one main dish, but there were two, because the guest might not like the one, but would probably like the other. The idea is being that you're being overly abundant.
And given choices, so yeah.
Yeah, and it's like what that symbolism of the cruets being full of wine instead of just a little tiny bit at the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
That with God, He is overly abundant.
I had to tell the servers that. Well, not the servers, the altar guild that, because they would put in just the amount of water and just the amount of wine they thought I would need for the service. And I said, no, you fill it to the top, because it represents God's overabundance and us taking from that rather than using it all up.
Yeah.
It sounds silly in its way, but there's a bunch of symbolism involved in what we do within our liturgies that kind of maybe impinges on you in a subconscious way rather than a conscious way, one would hope.
But I think we're considering having another instructed Eucharist.
Yes, and as we move towards more fully opening the church and having servers, we will wanting to retrain everyone so that we can all be on the same page after feels like forever.
It's been almost 2 years now.
Yeah, crazy, isn't it? well, that's it for this week. Thanks for joining us, you all. Hope you got something out of this. Also, on Tuesday evening, we will be having an All Souls Eucharist, in which we will mention all the names of the people that we have names for that appear annually in the monthly magazine. Now, if you have other names, please don't send them to us. Have those names with you. If you can either bring them, if you come to the service, bring them with you. If you're going to watch us online, which we're hoping will happen, then again, have those names with you. We will leave a minute or two of silence for you to bring before God those names. So that's 7 p.m. on Tuesday evening. So please either come to partake in person, or you can see us online, God willing, and we get a cameraman. So thanks for joining us. We hope you have a great day. Remember, there are supposed to be storms tomorrow, so if you're gonna, and it's supposed to be tomorrow afternoon, apparently, allegedly. So if you've got anything to do outside, get it done in the morning. And then stay safe, and hopefully we'll see you on Sunday, or you will see us.
God bless.
Take care. Bye for now.